Good morning, everyone. This class is on human resource management. And for those of you who have not taken this class before, or for those of you who do not know what is human resource management, we would like to begin by learning what exactly is human resource management, and more importantly, who are the managers? What is a manager? You see, first, we want to know who are the managers, what do they do, and more importantly, who are the good managers. The word manager itself is self-explanatory. Managers, they manage. And if you have ever worked in any company, you would have also probably been supervised or managed at your work, right? By a manager. And if you have worked for years, there's a good chance that you have worked for various organizations and under different people, those who have managed you. And these are the managers. And from all those times, I'm certain that you can easily pick the ones who were not that good with managing people and influencing others. And I'm also sure that you will certainly remember those managers who were exceptionally good in their role, and those managers who had inspired us to become a better version of ourselves. Well, what was it that you did not like about these managers? Or what was it that made you admire some managers? Were they good motivators or were they poor motivators? Were they easy or difficult to access? You see, there can be many reasons why you didn't like a certain manager, but there are some common mistakes a manager can unknowingly make that can have a negative influence on their subordinates. And some such mistakes are micromanagement. Well, you do not like your manager to look over your shoulders at your work, right? And you're not alone. No employee likes to be micromanaged. And a good manager must bear this in mind. And the mistake managers make is spoon feeding. And that's right. You see, a good manager don't. A good managers, they will not serve everything to their employees on plates. Rather, they will help develop and fine-tune the skills of their subordinates or those they manage in a way that they can resolve the trickiest of situations on their own. Good managers will never spoon feed their followers or subordinates. And that being said, some managers have this tendency of over providing solutions for their teams. And that's not good. Because you see, this habit of spoon feeding solutions, it prevents the employees from doing all the hard work of seeking the best solutions themselves. And you see, by always helping the employees with the solutions, these managers, they're not allowing their team members to put on their thinking caps and take ownership of the problem at hand. And the mistake that managers make is failing to set and define the goals. And that's not good, because poor planning and inability to define goals, they do not do your employees any good. And when you can't, or when you don't set goals for your employees, they will have no idea why they're doing the work or what their work means for themselves and as well as for the organization that they're working for. It means they can't be productive when they do not have a direction or vision for the work that they are doing. And what happens to these employees? Well, it means that without proper direction and guidance, these employees will fail to prioritize the work, which means that they will complete projects and tasks in the wrong order, or fail to complete the task and projects at all. And this, in turn, will leave the employees demotivated. It will demotivate the employees, and they won't be able to see any career growth in their jobs. And when they don't see any career growth in their jobs, when they don't see themselves developing, what will they do? They will tend to switch the jobs. You see what I mean here? And the mistake that the managers make is leading the subordinates or the followers with egoistic mindset. You don't want to work for someone with a huge ego, right? No one does. People with huge egos think that they have the best ideas and the information, and they use their position and authority to manipulate the others. You see, such people, they become arrogant. And when the managers become arrogant and egoistic, they lose their vision. They lose the perspective, and they only want to hear and see what they want to hear and see. And this in turn widens the gap between the managers and their subordinates or followers. So you need to keep this in mind. Another mistake that the managers make, and this happens a lot in the workplace, is showing blatant favoritism. We all know that favoritism and office politics, they exist at almost any workplace. Well, you should also know that it's bad, and that's bad with a capital B. Why? Because you see, it's disheartening and demoralizing for the employees when they already know who will be the next person to be promoted to the higher positions, just because he or she enjoys a close relationship with a manager. And you know who's good at office politics and favoritism? Who's good at this? It's the poor managers, the bad managers. And that's right. You see, these poor managers, these bad managers are quite good at showing who they favor over others, irrespective of an individual's abilities or the lack of them. And that's creating a toxic culture at the workplace. You see, managers who display signs of favoritism at the workplace can disrupt the workplace. And this unhealthy practice in the workplace sends the wrong signal to the employees, except for those who enjoy the manager's special attention. And you see, in these workplaces, the people are likely to believe that their hard and honest work doesn't bear fruit. And the only way to grow within the organization is by earning a place in the manager's good books. That is to earn the manager's favor. So now we know the mistakes that a poor or a bad manager would make in the workplace. If we are managing anyone, if we are in the position of the managers, all we got to do is steer clear of these mistakes, right? And how do we do that? Well, we should align organizational purpose with the team goals. We should also demonstrate empathy with our teams. We also need to delegate the tasks effectively. And we also need to set clear goals and expectations to the team. And most important of all, we have to make communication a priority. You see, good managers are the first ones to recognize this. And therefore, they will invest their time and energy in ensuring a smooth flow of communication throughout the project. And that's right. You see, as managers who want to earn the respect of your subordinates, your goal should be to bring out the best in your people, set up your team for success, inspire your team at every level, give your team credit when they succeed, and don't hesitate to take the blame when you do anything wrong or when you make any mistake. And why am I saying all this in human resource management class? That's because I'm all for setting you up as good managers, managers that the subordinates will respect and follow willingly. In this course, all of you will learn about management skills. You will learn how to find the right talents for your organizations. You will learn how to retain them. and how to motivate them by creating a positive and inclusive environment and not a toxic one, so that they can align their goals and visions with the company's goals and vision, so that they can trust you, so that they will know that you have their back, so that they won't be afraid to get their hands dirty. And this is what human resource management class is all about. It is the art, it is the science of effectively recruiting and handling the people in an organization. It is the practice of recruiting, hiring, deploying, and managing an organization's employees. That's right. You see, through every aspect of their jobs, from recruitment and hiring to professional development and retirement benefits, it involves all management decisions and actions that affect the relationship between the organization on one hand and its employees on the other. And we will learn about all these and more in this course. And by the time today's class is over, you will get an appreciation of what human resource management function in contemporary organizations comprises of. You will also learn how the concept and the importance of human resource management developed and grew over the years. You'll also learn how to practically apply the concept of human resource management by understanding the relationship between human resource management and strategy. That's right. You see, human resource management is used in two senses. First, it means and encompasses various people management activities such as hiring, firing, rewarding, and so on. And second, it also signifies a particular approach to the whole question of managing the people. And this means human resource management is both operational and it is also strategic as well. And additionally, from today's class, you will learn to appreciate the best practices and the best fit models of human resource management and strategy, as well as you will learn to recognize some of the key themes of human resource management in the 21st century. And finally, you will also understand the importance of some of the new forms of employment for human resource management. Our next topic is why human resource management. That's right. Why human resource management? Is it really that important to learn about it? The answer is yes. You see, human resource management is one of the most important courses in any MBA program. Because without human resource management, companies would not be able to effectively recruit and retain the employees. They would not be able to improve and enhance the corporation or the organization. And they wouldn't be able to maintain a healthy, accepting workplace culture and environment. You see, human resource management, it ensures the right quality and the quantity of the personnel in the workplace, apart from which it creates an opportunities to facilitate and motivate the individual and group of employees to grow and advance their career. You see, human resource management, it plays a key role in developing, in reinforcing and changing the culture of an organization. Pay performance management, training and development, recruitment, and onboarding and reinforcing the values of the business. These are all the essential elements of business culture that is covered by human resource. Human resource management, you see, is the art. It is the science of managing the strategies to ensure that the organization, that the company reaches its business goals, as well as contributing significantly to the corporate decision-making process, which includes things like assessments for the current employees and predictions for the future ones based on the business demands. And you see these quotes that you see on the slide. People are the only real source of sustainable competitive advantage. Nothing we do is more important than hiring people. At the end of the day, you bet on people, not on the strategies. To win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. If you're good to your staff when things are going well, they will rally when times go bad. Our assets walk out of the door each evening. We have to make sure that they come back the next morning. You see, these quotes, they were not made up by me. I did not make them up. These are the quotes of successful entrepreneurs, founders of business empires, and successful startups, motivational speakers. That's right. That's because people are indeed the most important assets of any company. The people can make or break a company. So if you still think that human resource management is useless, I strongly suggest that you think again. Now we will look at the evolution of human resource. So how and when did the concept of human resource originate? Well, you will be surprised to learn that the human resources field began to take shape in the 18th century Europe. It was built on a simple idea by Robert Owen and Charles Babbage during the Industrial Revolution. And these men, you see, had concluded that the people were crucial to the success of any company, any organization. They had expressed the thought that the well-being of the employees led to perfect work. And without healthy workers, a company would not survive. And later, human resource emerged as a specific field. Influenced by Frederick Winslow Taylor. You see, the idea of a connection between the workers' well-being and their productivity, it emerged as early as 1890s and the 1920s. And at that time, the American business leaders, aided by the scholars and the politicians, had embraced industrial betterment and had embarked on plans to stabilize the labor force and encourage the employee loyalty. And to carry out these somewhat surreptitious practices of the time, departments known as industrial welfare and scientific management were created. And then between the 1920s and the 1950s, and lucky for us, the workplace began to change with the realization that the workers were not puppets on a string. They were not mere machines, but they were people with emotion and psychological needs. And around that time, personnel development, personnel departments, manpower development, such words were created, such words were coined. And they increased their efforts around internal training, and they worked with labor unions to develop stronger compensation packages. And this is when human capital, it became synonymous for the knowledge and individual embodies in influencing the economic growth. And it was around this time that the term human resource management was also coined. It was coined by management guru Peter Drucker in his seminal work, The Practice of Management, where he had presented three broad managerial functions. And these were managing the business, managing other managers, and managing workers and work. And then between the 1960s and the 1980s, the welfare of the workers had caught the attention of the government, with the US legislature passing the Fairer Employment Practices, such as the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this compelled the human resource departments to focus more on compliance issues. And finally, from 1990s to date, the role of human resource grew more complex as new and emerging technology shifted the focus from the personal management and administrative tasks. And through over the decades, you see the workforce has evolved from being labor-based to services-focused, requiring the human resource to shift from a process-centric function to a worker-centric function. And moreover, you see the competitive business climate and globalization. It necessitated that the workforce change initiatives be based on and be integrated into the business strategies, drawing thereby more attention to human resource managers and even giving these talented human resource leaders a seat in the C-suite table. Now we will take a look at a video that walks us through the evolution of human resource management.
As far back as 5,000 years ago, skilled and unskilled slaves and conscripts, soldiers, and many others needed managing. How to best manage people is therefore a very long-standing and difficult issue. The modern concern with managing workers comes from the Industrial Revolution. Industrialization causes a massive shift away from farming and small-scale household production, literally cottage industries, to industrial work in factories and other workplaces. Depending on where you live, this transition may have occurred 200 years ago or is occurring right now. But the changes and the implications for workers and managers are the same. It's important that we understand the profound nature of these changes. Industrialists displace household as the controller of the production process. So individuals lost the autonomy and the discretion to decide when and how to work, how to structure their work tasks, when to do them, where they were going to work. And income also now becomes individually based rather than household based. Finally, women's unpaid caring work was rendered invisible as new norms equated valuable work to paid work done outside of the home. Now, early industrialists believed that they needed to impose strict discipline and closely monitor this workforce that wasn't used to working for someone else in a factory. And so the foreman, the supervisor, really became king. This is a system that we now refer back to as the foreman's empire, where the supervisor had the unquestioned authority to hire, to fire, to discipline, to assign work hours, and to motivate workers. And how were workers motivated? Through strict monitoring and the drive system. Threats, cajoling, profanity even, pointing to the factory gate, pointing to all those unemployed workers willing to take their job if they weren't willing to do exactly what the foreman wanted. Now, after this, there's an effort to try to systematize management as the production process becomes more complicated and factories get larger and more complex. Now, this didn't all pertain to human resources, but part of it did. And perhaps the most famous example that still endures today is scientific management, or Taylorism, after my distant cousin Frederick Winslow Taylor, who was really at the forefront of this movement. Now, Taylorism, or scientific management, sought to find the one best way to do every job, break every job down into small, standardized, repetitive tasks that any unskilled worker could do. For example, Taylor spent 4 months figuring out that the optimal shovel size was 21 pounds. Not 20 pounds, not 22 pounds, but 21 pounds. And so therefore, these jobs were broken down into small, standardized tasks that unskilled workers could do. And who was it that was determining how to break these jobs down? It wasn't workers. No, it was managers. They were seen as the ones who had all of the knowledge. What were workers? Workers were just cogs in a machine. They were just hands, farm hands, factory hands, deck hands. You know the phrase, all hands on deck. Now, around the same time, there was also an effort to apply psychological principles to managing workers. So this wasn't seen as only trying to get the technical conditions of work right, but also to get the human conditions right. Focus on appreciating that workers have different skills and levels of cognitive ability. Focus on the fact that job satisfaction, what we now call employee engagement, and other attitudes are important for how work gets done and how productive workers are. And also appreciate that group dynamics in the workplace are also an important factor. And this really is the key task of any manager today, not only to get the economic and technical conditions right, but also to get the human conditions right. Now, as we look back over this 5,000 history, 5,000-year history of the evolution of human resource practices, it's important not to simply see this as an evolution of practices, but also to see this as an evolution of ideas. When slaves and conscripts were managed in very hierarchical, authoritarian ways, this was rooted in assumptions that the elites of the time were absolutely superior in every way to slaves and conscripts, and therefore they had the right, sometimes even the divine right, to manage the workers that they saw as inferior to them. Fast forward several thousand years ago, and the early Industrial Revolution, when workers were managed in very hierarchical, authoritarian ways, well, this was rooted in a set of assumptions which owners thought that they had particular qualities that gave them their place in society. They were industrialists, they were at the top of society because they were ambitious, they were thrifty, they were sober, and they saw workers as lacking these qualities and therefore needed to be managed in very strict, hierarchical, authoritarian ways. We add in Taylorism, a new set of assumptions come to the fore. Workers now are seen as motivated by money, and they're willing to work to get money, but they want to do it in the most efficient way. And who is going to determine the most efficient way? Managers, because it's assumed that managers know best. We add in psychological and sociological theorizing to the problem of how to best manage workers. And now we add in a new set of assumptions about workers, that not only are they motivated by money, but they have psychological differences. They have psychological needs, social relationships, also important. So we have this evolution not only of practices, but also ideas. And as you're managing people, keep track of your own assumptions that you're making when managing others. So there's a number of key learnings that we can pull out of this quick review of the history of human resource management. How to manage people is a very old challenge. If you're finding it tough, you're not alone. Working for somebody else on their schedule, using methods and tasks that somebody else has set for them is a very difficult thing for many people. It's not how most people have lived for most of human history. Remember this when managing others. Also, we can see quite clearly that people management strategies change over time, and ideas matter as much as practices. So remember this when you're thinking about your own practices and your own ideas. And think about our current strategies that you're using, being encouraged to use, used by others in your organization. Are they out of date? Not only in terms of the practices, but in terms of the assumptions and the ideas that lie behind them. And finally, it's clear you have choices. Be an innovator as a manager.
Our next topic is, what do the human resource managers do? And that's right. What do the human resource managers do? Well, simply speaking, you see, the human resource manager will lead and they will direct the routine functions of the human resource department that will include the hiring and interviewing of the staff, administering their pay, taking care of the benefits as well as leave, and enforcing the company policies and the practices. You see, the human resource managers, they plan, they coordinate, and they direct the administrative functions of an organization. They oversee the recruiting, the interviewing and hiring of new staff. They consult with the top executives on strategic planning. And they also serve as a very, very vital link between an organization's management or the executives and the employees. You see, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, human resource managers, they typically do the following things. They plan and coordinate an organization's workforce to best use the employees' talents. They also link an organization's management with its employees. They plan and oversee the employee benefit programs. They serve as a consultant to advise other managers on human resource issues such as equal employment opportunity and sexual harassment. They also coordinate and supervise the work of specialists and support staff. They also oversee an organization's recruitment, interview, selection, and hiring processes. And they handle the staffing issues, such as mediating the disputes and directing disciplinary procedures. So the work of human resource managers, you see, it involves overseeing employee relations, securing regulatory compliance, and administering employee-related services such as payroll, training, and benefits. They also supervise the department's specialists and support staff and make sure that the tasks are completed accurately and on time. You see, the human resource managers, they also consult with the top executives regarding the strategic planning and the talent management. They also identify the ways to maximize the value of an organization's employees and ensure that they are used efficiently. For example, they might assess the worker productivity and recommend changes to help the organization meet the budgetary goals. In fact, some human resource managers, they oversee all the aspects of an organization's human resources department, including the compensation and benefits program, the training and development program as well. And in many larger organizations, these programs will be directed by specialized managers, such as the compensation and benefits manager, such as the training and development manager. And there can be other types of human resource managers as well, such as the employees relation manager, the payroll manager, and the staffing or the recruiting manager. And we may also look at the role of human resource management from the perspective of specific objectives, such as staffing objectives. You see, this includes recruiting and selecting the right people for the right job at the right time, as well as managing the release of the employees from the organization by means of resignation, retirement, dismissal, or redundancy. And there's performance objectives. This involves, you see, motivating the employees to ensure that they perform well. This means training and developing the employees, making reward and performance management systems, setting the grievance and the disciplinary procedures, and also making a welfare support and the employee involvement initiatives. And there's the change management objectives. You see, this includes employee relations or the involvement, the recruitment, and the development of the people with the necessary leadership and change management skills, and the construction of a proper reward system that will underpin this change. And then finally, we have the administrative objectives. And this includes the maintenance of accurate employee data on, for example, recruitment, contracts and condition of service, performance, attendance and training, ensuring organizational compliance with the legal requirements, for example, in employment law and employee relations, as well as health and safety. But do not confuse, you see, human resource manager and line manager. It's very important to note the difference between the two, the human resource manager and the line manager. And this begs the question, who are the line managers and what do they do? You see, line managers are more production and goal oriented, as it is their role to make or save money for the company. They're often referred to as the supervisors, if at a more entry level stage. And unlike the human resource managers, line managers are more hands-on oriented and responsible for getting the work done and maintaining the employee performance as well as handling disciplinary issues. On the other hand, you see, human resource managers has a legal and a moral responsibility to both the employee and the company with a much broader scope. And unlike the line manager, he's not directly responsible for the employee's performance. His role is to see that any issues, including labor relations and healthy and safety concerns, these are all dealt with fairly, legally, and in accordance with company policies. And which is why, you see, sometimes the line manager and the human resource manager may not see eye to eye. Both have high expectations of one another. There's friction when the demands aren't met, and sparks can fly when the tension boils over. You see, the line managers, they often see the human resource managers as a hindrance and more like a policy manual thumping in-house police department, let's say. And conversely, the human resource managers can see the line managers as what? As walking lawsuits due to the lack of training and understanding of employment laws. And all the more reason why human resource managers should spend time with the line managers in learning the business and how the goals are achieved. And line managers should also be trained by the human resource managers in legal and employee relations issues. That's right. You see, the relationship between the line manager and human resource manager may be complicated, but it should be cooperative. For example, in recruiting and hiring process, the line manager can describe the qualifications and the skills required to the human resource manager. And then the human resource will take over, and the human resource managers will develop sources of qualified applications and conduct the initial screening and interviewing. The human resource managers will then refer the suitable applicants to the line manager, who will then interview and select the ones he or she wants. You see, line managers needs to also prioritize, on the other hand, people management, including finding good ways to communicate and motivate their teams. And the line managers also need to collaborate with the human resource managers regularly so that both their objectives can be aligned and fulfilled. And on the other hand, you see, the human resource managers need to equip the line managers with the right tools and the skill sets to manage the staff properly, and as well as ask the line managers for regular feedback so that the human resource manager can also refine his plans and his ideas as well. Now we will take a look at the three major perspectives in the management of people. First is the pluralistic perspective. Pluralistic perspective. You see, the principal assumption of pluralistic perspective in industrial relations is that the organization, it comprises of individual groups of people which have their own aims, interests, and leadership. And these aims and interests often conflict, collide, and compete with other groups and give rise to tensions which have to be managed. Thus, you see, in pluralist view, the organization is seen as a plural society with related but separate interests and objectives, which should be tamed to a kind of equilibrium through conflict if the workers are expropriated. You see, the pluralists, they perceive the business organization as intricate social constructs that comprises of groups of people with conflicting interests, and the system is kept alive by the fact that the sectional groups with divergent interests, they aim for a common goal and are mutually dependent. And under this view, you see, the managers are expected to deploy many tactics in their professional functions should they expect to gain any accepted authority. And this involves organizing the work people and the technological resources, the shareholders, the customers, and the government, as well as the local community. And the managers who hold this perspective dearly, they seek to acquire some control through acting in the best interest of all the stakeholders. You see, pluralist workers and other stakeholders, on the other hand, they maintain their relations with managers as their source of information to deliver their goods and services to their satisfaction and to minimize workplace conflict. Next is unitarist perspective. You see, in the case of unitarism, focus is placed upon one source of authority without negotiation. It assumes a kind of partnership teamwork in its operation. You see, in a unitary system, the members are expected to strive as one unit and pursue one common goal. And every unit component does its part to the best of its ability. Members in the organization, you see, in the case of unitarism, are expected to exhibit discipline, loyalty, and effective communication, because the organized body is supposed to be integrated and harmonious whole. And following the centralized leadership members, you see, they accept their place and function, and this means antagonist groups and rivalry in the leadership are not tolerated. Thus, you see, the unitarist perspective, it holds that the workplace conflicts are avoidable. And according to the unitarists, the managers may avoid workplace conflicts by bringing all the stakeholders together and making sure that an organization is managed from a single source of power. And on the other hand, you see, the pluralists, they hold that the workplace conflict is inevitable. According to the pluralists, managers, they ought to convert this conflict into profitable initiative rather than criticize this. And then we have the radical, the critical, the Marxist perspective. You see, this view of industrial relations, it looks at the nature of the capitalist society, where there is a fundamental division of interest between capital and labor, and they see workplace relations against this background. And you see, this perspective, which is also known as the Marxist perspective after Karl Marx, it sees inequalities of power and economic wealth as having their roots in the nature of the capitalist economic system. And therefore, conflict is seen as a natural outcome of capitalism. It is seen as being inevitable, and the trade unions are seen as a natural response of the workers to the exploitation by capital. In other words, this perspective is to reveal the exploitative nature of the capitalist society. It recognizes inequalities in power, in the employment relationship, and in wider society as a whole. And consequently, you see, conflict is perceived as an inevitable result. And what's more, trade unions are seen as a natural response or solution to protect these workers against this capitalism exploitation. Okay. Now we'll be taking a look at the ideal characteristics of human resource management. The ideal characteristics of human resource management. The table that you are able to see on this slide, you will also find this same table in the prescribed textbook. Let's discuss the characteristics one by one. First is the strategic nature. You see, strategic human resource management is basically an approach that relates to decisions about the nature of employment relationships, about recruitment, about training, development, performance management, rewards, as well as employee relations. This is about the firefighting nature of human resource management, that is dealing with the short-term or immediate or urgent issues rather than taking a long-term strategic view of people management issues. Next is the psychological contract. What is a psychological contract? You see, unlike a formal codified employee contract, a psychological contract is an unwritten set of expectations between the employee and the employer. It includes informal arrangements, mutual beliefs, common ground, and the perception between the two parties. This is all about the unwritten expectations that exist between the employees and their employers. Next is job design. Job design is all about teamwork, about self-control and self-discipline to get the work done, rather than being driven by a system of compliance and directions and instructions being imposed upon them by the management. Job design is not the Taylorist Fordist system. What is the Taylorism? What is Fordism? You see, Taylorism was a system of production that was devised by Frederick Winslow Taylor, and it characterized by the division of factory work into the smallest and the simplest jobs, while closely coordinating the sequence of tasks in order to achieve maximum efficiency, as for example, on a production line. And as a result, the skilled managers and technicians, they oversaw the semi-skilled or unskilled workers who are engaged in simple, repetitive tasks. And this system of production has had its profound spatial implications, as the larger companies, they often allocated skilled and unskilled jobs to different locations, creating a division of labor. In other words, you see, Taylor believed that providing a systematic instruction to the workers would increase production and quality of the products and the services. He also believed that any work needed a preliminary study that determined its own methodology that was capable of generating maximum development and training of employees. And through the control of activities and the procedural norms, Taylor considered that the work should be executed according to a sequence and time that was pre-programmed. For Taylor, the good employee is the one who does not argue the orders and does what they're told to do without questioning and without imposing himself. And simply put, it is the management that plans and the workers that perform the tasks that are determined. Taylor called his system, he coined the word systematic management. And not surprisingly, during that time, Taylor's ideas had inspired a model of mass production that would revolutionize the industries, especially the automobile industry in the 20th century. And as for Fordism, you see, it's a scientific methodology that was propounded and implemented by Henry Ford. And it was first characterized by the mass production that had revolutionized the automotive industry in 1914, when the first automated assembly line was created. And at that time, Ford had created the mass market for the automobiles. The vehicles were mounted on a treadmill that moved while the employees stood still in their place, waiting for the vehicle to approach to perform step-by-step production. And that required almost no qualification of the worker. And the characteristics of Ford's methodology was that the work was delivered directly to the worker and no useless movements by the worker were necessary. However, note that Fordism had only gained momentum till the 1960s, because in the 1970s, this methodology had declined. And the reason or the cause for the decline was General Motors, which had adopted a more flexible production and management model and had also launched several models of vehicles, unlike Ford at that time. You see, Fordism had also declined due to the entry of the Japanese automobile competitors into the automobile market. And ultimately, Fordism had lost its strength and it was gradually replaced by the Toyota production system. Nonetheless, you see, it cannot be emphasized enough that thanks to Taylorism, Fordism, that the automobile became a mass consumer product. And because of the high salaries and ease of credit, the automobiles, they came within the reach of the middle class at that time. And many people were able to purchase their own vehicles. Then we have the organizational structure. You see, this is about fewer management levels and less hierarchy. This is about having core of key employees surrounded by peripheral shells of other workers, rather than the traditional hierarchical pyramid-shaped bureaucratic structure. You see here the core members, they do not mean the senior executives, though it may include the directors and the CEO. Core members here, it means members of the organization who possess the skills, the knowledge, and the competency necessary for the organization's success and growth. And these core workers will be high in demand and will consequently enjoy better remuneration and terms of employment than the others. And in return, they will be expected to provide high levels of performance, commitment, and flexibility in working, and they will accept the need for continuous higher learning and reskilling to support the incessant technological and process improvements. And these core members, you see, will be surrounded by the peripheral shells of employees that will act as buffers against the short-term market fluctuations, and those that can be easily hired and fired. Those who will tend to be employed on short-term or temporary or seasonal basis. Those who will be doing the non-core work. These are the peripheral shells. Then we have remuneration. Traditionally, you see remuneration depended on hierarchical organizational structure and was determined by the length of service rather than the current contribution. And such pay structures will usually be determined through collective bargaining, especially for non-managerial employees. However, human resource management approach to remuneration is more focused on rewarding contributions of the workers, and it could be individual or team-based. And this means using the tools that help gauge the performance and set the base rates from the market rather than by means of collective bargaining. Next is recruitment. You see, traditionally, during recruitment, psychometric testing, psychological profiling, and assessment centers, these were often used for recruitment and selection purpose and process for the senior executive positions, while much simpler and less costly methods usually were suffice enough for the non-managerial employment. However, you see, with the human resource management, these sophisticated tools are much more likely to be used now for all the employees, or at least for the core employees, with a view to selecting the right staff that are highly amenable and committed to the organization's cultures and values. And then we have training and development. Traditionally, you see here, the employees were viewed as a cost. They were viewed as a cost that should be minimized. And companies, they did not adopt any employee training and development programs out of fear that these employees will anyways be poached by their competitors. However, human resource management changed this way of thinking by emphasizing that continuous training and development of key or core employees is necessary to give the company a sustainable competitive advantage over its competitors. The peripheral shells of workers, however, you see, they are not included in these training and development programs as such. Then we have the employee relations perspective. And here, in the case of human resource management model, you see the employment relation is more individualized than when dealing with the workforce collectively. And this is marked by the absence of trade unions and collective bargaining, and rather it is dependent on performance-related reward system. Next is organization of the function. You see, traditionally, people management was seen as a specialist function, which in many important respects, such as dealing with employee-related issues, you see, it was separate from the line management. And this often led to creation and the maintenance of large bureaucratic personnel departments. However, the human resource management model, it advocates that the people management is just a part of normal management, at least in its day-to-day aspects. And if there are any human resource departments, such departments should be specialized, and their function should be to, first of all, formulate human resource policies, and second, to act as an internal consultant to the line managers. And that's right. You see, it is the line managers who will implement most of the human resource policies and will seek involvement or consult with the human resource department only in very specific or particularly difficult matters or situations. Then we have the welfare rule. You see, traditionally, this meant that the personnel officer, being the member of the management team, could be approached with personal problems, or at least if this had impacted the work. And this, however, you see, always led to ambiguous perceptions of personnel management and would leave many employees dissatisfied and expecting more. And the role of these personnel managers weren't also an inviolable one. You see, such managers were often caught in the crossfire between the dissatisfied employees on one hand and the unsympathetic management on the other. And note that, however, in the human resource management model, there is no explicit welfare role, probably because some argue that with the unitarist culture, an explicit welfare role is not necessary. However, also note that individual employees, they still continue to expect some sort of welfare role from the human resource management. Also note that the human resource management is held to a very different criteria for success of the function. That's right. The human resource management is held to a very different criteria for success of the human resource function. Traditionally, you see, an organization would judge the performance of the personnel management model by just one criterion, one factor: how effectively it minimized the labor cost. However, human resource management's effectiveness is judged by how well it maximizes the use of the organization's human resources, while of course at the same time still maintaining proper control over the cost. Now we'll take a look at the strategic human resource management and universalist and contingency approaches. What is strategic human resource management? Well, strategic human resource management, or it's also called as people strategy, is all about creating a coherent, planned framework for the employees to be hired, managed, and developed in ways that support an organization's long-term. It helps to ensure, you see, that the various aspects of people management, they work together to drive the behavior and the climate needed to create value and meet the performance targets. It focuses on the longer term people issues, matching the resources to the future needs, and large scale concerns about the structure, the quality, the culture, the values, and the commitment. It must also be a response to the evolving nature of the work itself. Note that, you see, there's no single human resource management strategy that will deliver success in all the cases. Organizations, they must define their own unique strategy according to their specific context, culture, and objectives. You see, people, professionals, they're instrumental in applying their expertise to understanding the organizational circumstances and designing the human capital value chains that will reflect this shareholder demands. And to put it simply, you see, strategic human resource management is basically the connection, is a connection between a company's human resources and its strategies, objectives, and goals. And it involves looking at ways that the human resources can make a direct impact on a company's growth. And the aim of strategic human resource management, you see, is to, therefore, first of all, advance the flexibility, innovation, and competitive advantage. But of course, second, to develop a fit for purpose organizational culture. And third is to improve the business performance. And now let's talk about the two approaches to the strategic human resource management: the universalist approach and the contingency approach. You see, universalist approach, it states that the best practices in relation to a wide range of human resource issues such as employee recruitment and selection, training and development, employee motivation, is equally applicable to each organization, regardless of the nature of the unique aspects these organizations might have. Thus, the universalist perspective, according to its scholars and proponents, it starts with the premise that there exists a relationship between the adoption of particular human resource management practices and increased organizational performance. So it proposes a best practices that, when adopted and implemented, would contribute positively to the financial performance regardless of the strategic goals of the organization. And further, this assumption that the human resource management practices, they have an effect on the employee motivation as well as increased efficiency. So the universalist approach is the best practices approach, is the one size fits all approach. On the other hand, a contingency approach to strategic human resource management is based on the theory that management effectiveness is contingent or dependent upon the interplay between the application of the management behaviors and specific situations. So it suggests that the organizations, they need to adapt their human resource management practices according to the business strategy that is employed. In other words, the way you manage should change depending on the circumstances. And to put it simply, contingency or the best fit approach, it disagrees with the presence of universal prescriptions to human resource issues. And it stresses, on the other hand, the need for integration between human resource policies and a wide range of other organizational policies. You see, human resource management practices that are not consistent with business strategies and are in conflict with other human resource management practices, they create confusion or ambiguity, which may lead to decreased performance for the individual as well as the organization. So by using contingency theory, the organization can promote employee behaviors that are consistent with the business strategy of the organization, because behavior stems from ability and motivation, and therefore the organizations can implement human resource practices to recruit the individuals they need while promoting the policies which motivate the employee to work in harmony with the said strategies. Now let's discuss a bit more about the best practices approach and the best fit approach. You see, most organizations, they do not place a high enough focus on human capital management as a component of core competence. But that's important. We need to put focus on human capital management as a component of core competence. You see, in order for the organization to be successful in any market, they must have a strategic approach in managing the human resources, which will lead to the creation of a workforce that provides a sustainable competitive advantage. And this relationship between performance and human resources management can be linked into two strategic approaches, which are the best practice approach and the best fit approach. And as explained earlier, the best practice model, it claims that certain bundles of human resource activities exist which universally support in improving any organizational performance, in reaching a competitive advantage regardless of the organizational setting and irrespective of the location and the size. In other words, there is one best way. There is only one way. It is the one size fits all approach. However, we all know that what works well in one organization will not necessarily work well in another organization, because it may not fit its strategy, it may not fit its culture, it may not fit its management style or its technology or working practices. On the other hand, the best fit approach, which is also known as the contingency model, and the proponents of this approach, it asserts that there is no universal way of doing things, as what might work well in one place may be unsuccessful in another place. It emphasizes contingency fit between the human resource activities and the organization stage of development, and an organization's internal structure and its external environment, like clients, like suppliers, competition, labor markets, and so on. So the human resource policy should therefore be minted by the appropriate context of individual employees, and therefore it should support the overall competitive strategy. And aligning the human resource management practices to the strategies can enable the companies to create potential competitive advantage. Therefore, according to the best fit approach, there can be no universal prescription for the human resource management policies and practices. That means it all depends. It all depends. This is not to say that good practice or leading edge practice, that is the practice that does well in one successful environment, should be ignored. No. For instance, benchmarking, that is comparing what the organization does with what is already done elsewhere. It is a valuable way of identifying areas for innovation or development that are practiced to good effect elsewhere by the leading companies. But having learned about what works and ideally what does not work in comparable organizations, it is up to the organization now to decide what may be relevant in general terms and what lessons can be learned that can be adapted to fit its particular strategic and operational requirements. And it was Michael Porter who had propounded 3 generic business strategies to find sustainable competitive advantage. These were the differentiation strategy, the cost leadership strategy, and the focus strategy. However, note that we should be skeptical about too mechanistic a fit between the human resource practice and the business strategies. And the best approach here is to regard the best fit prescriptions as the starting point in selecting the appropriate human resource practices for a particular organization. Now we will look at 2 emerging themes in human resource management. The first is a new form of employment, which is known as crowdsourcing. And second is the corporate social responsibility and the ethics. You see, with the turn of the 21st century and the emergence of numerous social media platforms, a new way of working has emerged and has caught the significant attention in the market. And that is known as crowdsourcing, a crowd employment. You see, crowdsourcing consists of outsourcing various kinds of activities in the form of an open call to an undefined network of people. That is the crowd. While in traditionally resource management in business processes, the resources are known and the tasks are assigned is usually controlled. You see, the workers in crowdsourcing platforms, they are unknown and they are allowed to select the task they want to perform. And to put it simply, you see, crowdsourcing is the art of tapping a broad set of people collaborating in a purposeful, structured social platform to solve business problems, ranging from high volume, low value tasks to challenges that are requiring sophisticated, highly specialized skills. You see, crowdsourcing, which is basically asking a community of people for ideas, for content and funds, may prove to be the innovation accelerant that the human resource space needs to advance it into the 21st century, once and for all. In fact, the big companies, you see, have already sought the wisdom of the crowd to do things like improving product research and development, or product design, or problem solving, as well as other applications. Also note that crowdsourcing is different from outsourcing. Outsourcing, it means transfer or delegation to an external service provider, the operation and day-to-day management of the business process. It is used by almost every organization in one way or the other. The functions being outsourced by the business are basically also considered non-core to the business itself. And in human resource in particular, you see, crowdsourcing has been widely used, for example, to support recruitment of temporary people or temporary staff to manage specific time-bound tasks. For example, software development. And I strongly believe, you see, that we are at the dawn of an expanded use of crowdsourcing in the human resource world, because it can ensure, first of all, higher engagement from all the stakeholders and employees. It can also ensure lower operating costs and better use of the workforce. It can also ensure better reputation in the market and in the public opinion, thanks to this open relationship the company builds with the external environment. However, note that crowdsourcing, being a new source of selecting people for specific jobs or tasks, it will require a lot more effort and innovation in the beginning to select the right person or the right people. And in this regard, you see, the right mode and effective communication with and verification of the expertise of the person to be engaged for any project or task, this will be of vital importance. And similarly, a complete understanding of the rules and the conditions, as well as a clear idea about the reputation of the source acting as a medium, this will be essential. You see, crowdsourcing offers many opportunities to the human resource management, but at the same time, it has brought many challenges for the human resource departments as well. And it must rise to the occasion and develop new competencies, you see, to cater for the requirements of crowdsourcing. Now let's take a video that explains about crowdsourcing.
Have you heard about the term crowdsourcing? Crowdsourcing is the process of connecting with a larger group of people via the internet to tap their knowledge, expertise, and resources. Who is the king of crowdsourcing? The term crowdsourcing was coined by Jeff Howe in 2006 while he was working at Wired magazine, but crowdsourcing goes all the way back to the 1700s. Even before the age of the internet and crowdsourcing, people used to work in groups and collaborate. Let's go back in time for a while. In 1714, the British government offered a reward to anyone who came up with a method to determine a ship's longitude. Also, in 1884, a group of scholars created the first Oxford Dictionary. It seemed like an impossible task until various experts volunteered to write about different topics according to their expertise. What is the present scenario? The web-based crowdsourcing efforts today include voting, funding, creative sourcing, mobile crowdsourcing, data collection, talent searching, and microwork. The most prevalent forms of crowdsourcing are crowdfunding, where people can raise capital from the people who believe in their ventures, ideas, and beliefs, such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Mobile crowdsourcing is an activity that takes place on a smartphone or other portable devices. where data is collected from the crowd for a better user experience. Apps such as Google Maps, Waze, Uber, and Lyft use this data collection method. Creative outsourcing is when customers can select the best design for a website, logo, or graphic from a pool of submitted entries. The selected designer would then give payment. Some examples are Fiverr and 99 Designs. What are the upsides to crowdsourcing? Crowdsourcing can be used by companies, the government, nonprofit groups, or individuals for whatever need they may have. There are 4 advantages of crowdsourcing. First, it allows you to access large online labor forces, where you can select the workers, or you can just post the work and let the worker find you. Second, it allows you to ask the crowd to find a solution. Third, it allows you to find and organize available knowledge. And finally, you can get feedback, opinions, and ideas from the crowd. What about the downsides? Of course, crowdsourcing has some drawbacks. First, there is no guarantee that the results are credible. Second, the manager could waste time managing a large scale of outsourced workers. And finally, it is not always easy for crowd members to collaborate on a project. Will the crowdsourcing make our life better? What do you think? Please leave a comment. Thank you for patiently watching the video.
So that was crowdsourcing. Now let's talk about corporate social responsibility and ethics. Let's see how human resource management and corporate social responsibility and ethics are all entwined together. You see, human resource has a key role to play in embedding corporate social responsibility in all aspects of the business. And this can be achieved through various means, including ensuring corporate responsibility is part and parcel of human resources strategy itself, and trading the sustainable concerns to the people management policies and the practices, as well as developing the management capability and promoting organizational learning in the corporate social responsibility, and also ensuring the alignment between the organization's values, culture, and business activity. And it is in the last of this, you see that human resource is seen to have a unique role in corporate social responsibility. And beyond its own remit of people management practices, it is ideally placed to be able to gauge, understand, and help change the organizational culture. The critical aspect to the corporate responsibility that is often summed up as how we do the things around here. You see, organizational culture, it runs through all aspects of a business. And in acting as its guardian, human resource can act as a mirror of conscience to the rest of the organization. A research that was conducted in 2012, it had comprised of a survey of human resource as well as other managers. And it had featured in-depth interviews with the human resource directors and the heads of corporate responsibility department. And according to that survey, the great majority of human resource managers, it was 81%, they see their contribution to the corporate responsibility agenda as vital, and a similar portion, which is 78%, believe that they make a valuable contribution to driving and promoting it in practice. And yet that survey had pointed to a stark reality gap between how the human resource function views itself and the opinion of the managers in the rest of the business. While there are some in the human resource community who are yet to be fully convinced of its role in corporate responsibility, a far greater proportion outside human resource are skeptical. So clearly, you see, human resources aspirations and efforts on corporate responsibility are not matched by its actual influence, impact, and visibility. In other words, it is a smaller, more peripheral player in corporate responsibility than it would like to think. However, we should not be discouraged. You see, human resources contribution to corporate responsibility is still considered vital by the majority of the general managers, which was 56% according to the survey, and nearly half, which was 46%, they see it as making a valuable contribution in reality. You see, therefore, human resource clearly has a great deal to offer on corporate social responsibility. But we will only realize this if it is at the heart of these debates and an influential player in the organization itself. And part of the solution, you see, may lie in the fact that currently human resource includes corporate responsibility into its own operational activity only to a limited extent. If human resource wants to be associated with the corporate social responsibility, there is more it can do to lead by example in putting corporate responsibility at the center stage. And also, you see, a timely place to start would be to promote learning and development on values-based leadership to help and nurture the leaders throughout the organization. What kind of leaders? Those who are self-aware and those who display integrity. And to become more influential, the human resource leaders also needs to be business savvy and may need to develop their own leadership capability. These human resource leaders, you see, they should not necessarily aim to become the in-house experts on corporate responsibility in other aspects of the organization. You see, for example, carbon emissions and energy. But they do need to know enough about how the different parts of the business work to be able to take part in the debates on the ethical and other issues. You see, corporate responsibility is all about stakeholders inside and outside of the organization and making sure that the right discussions are being held with the right people involved. The crucial point is that human resource is not absolved from the corporate responsibility of other aspects of the business, and it needs to be able and willing to ask the challenging questions. And I strongly believe that human resource management can play a key role. It can play an important role in truly embedding corporate social responsibility in the life of the company. For example, it can play a role of training or sensitizing the employees on corporate social responsibility topics. It can also integrate corporate social responsibility into its evaluation process by integrating the corporate social responsibility criteria into the annual evaluation meetings. You see, in both the small and the large companies, the role of human resource can also be to create ambition around corporate social responsibility to make it something fun. For example, organize an internal competition around corporate social responsibility. You see, putting human resource at the service of corporate social responsibility is therefore an investment, and it's a valuable investment, both for an human resource manager, an employer, or an employee. And it is an investment that can yield in financial terms as well as in terms of work-life quality. You see, corporate social responsibility is no longer a just nice thing to have for a company. It is an essential part of doing business itself. Consumers are becoming more aware of the surroundings of the environment, of things that the company promises to do for the society at large. And they're increasingly likely to make purchasing decisions based on your company's corporate social responsibility activity. And successful hiring, it will often depend on the authenticity of your organization's values. So in order to create a culture of corporate responsibility, it is essential for the human resource to take a central role. And when human resource is driving corporate social responsibility within your organization, you can be rest assured that every employee will take it upon themselves to uphold your values on a daily basis. And this creates a self-regulating environment that stays true to your vision. Similarly, you see, human resource can also do a lot to ensure that companies remain ethical. You see, companies and employees today are experiencing an array of pressures that create conditions for potential ethical dilemmas and conflict. Economic pressure combined with increased internal and external competition, it means that many people are striving to achieve more with fewer resources and reduced funding. Political upheavals and instability and uncertainty are also increasing anxieties around job security and staffing. Also, the accelerating pace of technology advancements are changing the skill requirements, interaction patterns, as well as the power dynamics. And social factors mean that the workers, they're struggling to manage a healthy lifestyle and work-life balance in the face of competing demands from career commitments, childcare responsibilities, and overlapping care for the elderly parents as well. Note that the increasing globalization also requires greater cultural sensitivity in the business activities as well as among the international workforces. And legislative and ethical changes in areas such as data protection and privacy have also created new responsibilities for the organizations and employees as well. But upholding these responsibilities is coming under threat from the risks such as hacking and environmental pressures, including the need to respond to climate change and minimize pollution and waste and protect the biodiversity. These are all seen as conflicting with the economic pressures and the entrenched human behaviors. And there could be more reasons as well, that give rise to the ethical problems and concerns in almost any type of business. You see, while ethical issues arising in high-profile companies such as Starbucks, Zara, or Facebook, they attract wide media attention, ethical issues can just be as potentially damaging in small and medium-sized enterprises and non-profit organizations as well. In today's connected, globalized business context, you see, all organizations can find themselves at risk of reputational damage and of having detrimental reports spread widely to the social media channels to multiple audiences all at once. See, human resource managers' role in the ethical conduct within an organization can feed in at various points. First of all, it can be in the nurturing of an ethical organizational culture. It can also be in the recruitment of staff who will set the ethical tone of the organization and uphold its values and ethical climate. It can also be in the resolution of ethical conflicts when it occurs. And it can also be the dealing with the aftermath of an ethical conflict itself. You see, the first two of what I just said just now, it can help to minimize the likelihood of ethical problems occurring in the first place itself. You see, ethical conflict, once it has risen, it presents a vast number of challenges. It can give rise to distortion of the facts, to protect the vested interest by the parties concerned, or avoidance of the involvement by the witnesses for fear of reprisals or jeopardizing their own relationship with one or more parties, as well as the abuse of power in the outcomes of the conflict. And in this regard, you see, human resource managers can help to ensure that organizations, they operate with due concern for fairness, for integrity, for justice, both to reduce the likelihood of ethical conflicts arising and also in dealing with them in the event that they do. You see, ethically unhealthy organizations, that is companies that pursue unethical business practices, such companies, they will likely lose good employees. They will likely lose talented employees because they encourage a detrimental zero-sum mentality rather than a win-win one. So in handling the ethical problems, the human resource managers, they need to appreciate the complexities involved in all this. They need to avoid escalation of the issue. They need to protect against the emotional and the reputational impact that can result from them. And remember that it is also increasingly important for the human resource managers to develop a global perspective on ethical issues as well.